What I want to do today, I'm not here to help you. We're in this together. So I have a few questions, a little background I want to cover, and then I'm just going to share with you some of the things that have worked for us in this effort to provide a housing opportunity to the chronically homeless individuals and now homeless vets in the state of Utah. So one of the things that we did, and I will encourage you to do, is that we did a pilot. We said, okay, if this is going to work, we had better give it a try. So we took $150,000 of existing money, and we said, we're going to take 25 chronically homeless people, and we're going to put them in scattered site, and we're going to see if it works while we build 100 units. We're at a decision point. And so it was existing money when we, and then I was reared on a ranch. We had a wood stove. I chopped the wood for the stove with an axe, and I learned to chop the big end of the log first. So I said, if we're going to do this, we're going to take the most challenging chronically homeless people we can find, and we're going to put them into housing, because if we can house those, then we'll prove to ourselves anybody can be housed. Because we had to, and I believed it, and I was pretty comfortable it would work, but a lot of the case managers were saying, we're going to take this guy in Pioneer Park, that's kind of that's a park down there where a lot of homeless hang out, been homeless 20 years, mental health, substance abuse, and we're going to put him in a unit, just a scattered site unit, and what was your name again?
Gene.
Gene's house or apartment, and just put him in there, or her. That's a pretty big pill to swallow for a lot of people. So we went through a process, and we tried it. 22 months later, all 17 were still housed. The average is 85% will be housed after 12 months. It was an epiphanal moment. The case managers, we had a debriefing at the end, kind of the end of this when we made the next transition. They said, we used to go up to the University of Utah, and we used to debate when we were in school about what case management theory worked here and what worked there in case management theory, what worked, what didn't work. He said, now we understand case management is anything necessary to keep them housed. They were convinced, the administrators were convinced, then we went down the road. But it was $150,000, 17. It proved to us that it worked in Salt Lake City. That was a huge piece, and so we'll talk about pilots as we go along. So, quick overview. All of you know that there's an annual point-in-time count done every year. You did it here at the end of January. The last 10 days of January, everybody has to do a homeless count. On the odd years, you're to count also the unsheltered, but every year you count the sheltered. We count sheltered, unsheltered every year in our state, have for since 2005. Persons and families, single individuals, chronic homeless, veterans, other subpopulations. And so, for those of you that are not aware, the continuum of care is the HUD mechanism that organizes this point-in-time count. And that becomes the basis by which the homeless population in the country, or this country, is tracked, measured. Is it going up? Is it going down? And so that becomes the key measure. Also, HUD has put out money and said you have to have a homeless management information system. Who here runs the HMIS? Anybody? Nobody? Are you familiar with the homeless management information system? Okay, you have one. It has data. It becomes a means by which you can track and measure the results of your data. So I encourage you to get a hold of that, whoever has it. And then also there's a national focus on chronic homelessness. Why is there a national focus on chronic homelessness?
It's a problem.
Okay, it's a problem. Okay, that's good. Homeless is not a problem. Chronic homelessness is a problem. So why chronic homelessness?
It's the most expensive.
Pardon?
It's the most expensive to serve.
There was a major study done, and they found that if 100 people are homeless, 10 of them will be chronically homeless. So 10% are chronically homeless. And they also found that 10% uses 50 to 60% of the homeless resources. In addition, they have lots of arrests. Their health care is the emergency room. They have EMT runs, a lot of time in jail, and they can cost the community $40,000 to $100,000 a year per person per year. This 10% can cost the community that kind of money, but you don't see it. Matter of fact, Greg polled the frequent flyers at the jail here. 20 of them had 20,000 jail nights over the 3 years, $1.5+ million for those 20 individuals that you have in this very city. Cost you that money. Who absorbed that? Who absorbed it?
Y'all do.
You all did. The emergency room, is the lady here from the hospital? She didn't make it. He's also getting the frequent flyers at the hospital. The police were protected and safe here. Do you know who the frequent flyers are in this city? You could name them, couldn't you? There's about 12 or 15, right? He knows them by name. I mean, I go down to Moab, Utah, and they call them the Winter Boys. Why? They're on the Colorado River. Come winter, they commit a crime, and where do they go? To the jail for 2 or 3 months, where they're warm, fed, and then they can get out for the spring. They call them the Winter Boys. So, there's a focus. They said, wow, 10%? We have 300,000 chronically homeless people in a country of 300 million plus. Why in the world can't we house 300,000 people spread across 50 states and all of these cities? Why can't we get them housed? They're very expensive. And you don't see them because the jail absorbs it, the hospital absorbs it, the police absorbs it, the EMT people absorb it. So you have all these costs spread out through the community that you really don't tally up and say, whoa, this is really expensive. So that's basically what HUD and the federal government said we want to do. So President Bush reinstituted the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness and said, we're going to activate this and we're going to develop a model to do a 10-year plan, and we're going to go out and encourage all those who continue care money. And Philip Mangano was executive director of the USICH. Came out, he came to Boise, he came to Salt, I don't know how many times did he come here, probably twice or 3. He came to Salt Lake 3 or 4 or 5 times. He liked us. He came out a lot. We wanted him, and he was really a drum beater, and he rallied the people, and we had 350 10-year plans put together, mayors, governors, commission, blue ribbon committees, and they wrote this plan, and they delivered it to Gene, the governor, and said, this is the plan. And he said, oh, thank you for the great work. Committee's dismissed. Now, you're going to implement it.
Okay.
And that was about it. Okay. Now, she may have been on the committee, and so they said, okay, you're going to implement it. And I said, okay, and that's on top of everything. What's your name?
Kelly.
Everything else is Kelly's doing. Now, she's a very powerful lady, but she's very busy. And she said, okay, I'm going to give it to Fran, because a lot of her desk, okay, now you're going to kind of take charge of this. So Fran said, okay, I'll work on it.
Okay.
So she holds meetings, and holds meetings, and holds meetings, and holds meetings, and holds meetings. And we say, and then you say, how are you doing? We're holding meetings, and we're working on it. And 7 years later, you are
Working on it?
working on it. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Does that happen?
Yes.
It's called the bureaucratic shuffle. I call it that. So, that's why the focus on chronic homelessness. It's a small population, very expensive, and the case can be made economically as well as humanitarianly. So, HUD organization applies for HUD funding. You have 2, we have 3, Michigan has 21, some have 30 or 40. I just put that up to give it. You had a question in the back row? Hands are up, you can't hear? She can't hear, she's not hearing me? Okay. So, you plan and coordinate. Now, one of the things that we're working with there, the continuing care sometimes think they're in charge of everything. They're not. The continuing care is a very important part of the process, and they have the homeless management information responsibility. But there's other funding. There's home money, there's ESG money, we have a homeless trust fund money. So the plan is beyond just the continuum of care. So you need to begin to take a look at the bigger issue and realize that continuum of care is a key piece of it. But I'm saying don't give them, may I just suggest this, they don't have the full responsibility because there's other funding. There are other people in the game that need to make this happen. If you just look at the continuum of care, they are limited in what they can do. The people who run that. I don't know who runs it here, but whoever runs it. I think this place runs part of it. Idaho. So, they're an important piece, but not the whole piece. May I emphasize. Now developing coordinated assessment. HUD has said, in order to get your funding, and now HUD has prioritized this funding and moved away from services to housing and saying you need to get people housed, you need to get supportive services from the human services and from other sources. HUD had been doing about 60% service, I think it was. They've moved now to like 80% housing. They're shifting their priorities. Now, people will rail, why this, woe is me. They're housing. And so they're shifting their priorities. And so, like it or not, that's the way it's going. So it's important that you begin to understand that and work with it if you want to do make some changes. Now, you get in Ada County about $1 million through your continuum of care. Is that a lot of money?
No,
No, but is it an important part of the piece?
it is.
Absolutely. You can do pilots with it, you can prioritize it, you can repurpose it. There's all things you can do with it. It can become the starter piece for what it is you want to do. When you decide what it is you want to do. But you need to decide what you want to do, not me. I think the last time you came here, you said, whoa, that's wonderful. Keep up the good work. No, you need to decide what you choose to do. And so that's what we're going to have some discussion on today. So I just went and pulled some numbers. Okay, here's the homeless population. In Idaho, it's 1,781 in your 2013 count. That's the point-in-time count. On that night, you counted over 1,700 people in the shelters, on the street, in transitional housing. Utah had 3,200. And in the country, we had 610,000. Unsheltered, unsheltered was 322%. We had 12% unsheltered, and nationally it's 38% unsheltered. That means they're on the street, in the car, under the overpass, etc. Chronic homeless individuals, see, out of that 1,700, you had 21%. We had 12% out of that were unsheltered. And why do you think HUD has the count done in January?
It's one of the coldest months of the year.
It's one of the coldest months of the year, and therefore they should be where?
In a shelter.
In the shelter. Now, we open up an overflow shelter, and we'll have 90 families in the overflow shelter from November 1 to April 1. And we open up the soup kitchen, which is across the street from the largest shelter, and those that are inebriated, we put mats on the floor, roll the tables up after the evening meal, put mats on the floor, and there'll be 80 over there. They don't let inebriates into the shelter, too many problems. So there'll be 80 over there, 90 families down at the 15 miles south, and last night they probably housed 1,100 people in one shelter, 3 locations. Quite a few people. Veterans, you had 208, we had 291. There's 62,000 homeless veterans in the country. Persons and families, 39. We had 40 nationally, so that's pretty consistent. Annualized, okay, when we started our process, now HUD looks at the point-in-time count. But we realized that if we take, no, you're Fran. No.
Jesse.
Here's Fran, you're Jesse. We're going to also, well, you're making changes, so you're taking notes, okay.
Alan.
Alan? Mm-hmm. Alan, when we counted on January 29th, he was sleeping in that bed. Now, if we were to take and count all the people who slept in that bed for the next 12 months, how many people do you think would sleep there? 5. Maybe 6, 5.5. So, we said when we put out our numbers, we call it annualize them, because we need to capacitize to handle 5 people that will sleep in that bed over the next 12 months. So the numbers that we put out are annualized, because we didn't want to put out we only have 3,000 people homeless each night. Well, that's easy. No, we'll deal with 15,000. So we put out in our numbers, in our press releases, the annualized number. So we're dealing with 15,000. And then we take that as a percent of the population of the geographical area. Because when I go around to the rural areas, and I'd say, we're working on homelessness, Lieutenant Governor is supportive of this, and we want to work with you political leaders, and they said, we don't have any homeless people in Moab, Utah, because they don't see them. Now you can talk to the police or the sheriff, and they say, yeah, we got this 6 or 7 down on the river, and they frequent flyers, the Winter Boys. But the mayor says, county commissioner said, we don't have any. So I said, well, just lo and behold, there was a count done last year, and we counted X number, and when I annualize those and take them as a percent of your county population, you're 0.8% of your population, and the state is 0.5. You have more homeless population more homeless folks per your population than what the whole state does. So I framed it in the context of their population to help them realize, oh, we do have some homeless. And they ought to be 5 or 6, but they're still a significant piece of the population. We have counties that have 942 people or 8,000 people, and a big county. Now, I looked up some of yours. You have 44 counties, I think. Some have 900, some have 1,500, some several. So you have some pretty rural counties. Just a sidebar, I would suggest you get fewer counties, but that probably won't happen. Okay, so we annualize those numbers, and so we take the non-chronic times 5 and the chronic times 2, because Alan will be, Alan?
Yes.
Alan, if he's chronically homeless, he'll probably sleep in that bed for 300 days or 250 days. And then Brian will show up and he'll sleep 300 days. So there'll be 1.5 to 2 people sleeping in that bed if you're chronically homeless. So that's how we annualize it, to begin to get the magnitude of the issue with what we're dealing. So, any questions on this? Does this make sense? So if you look at Idaho, when I annualized using that vote, you had 0.5, we had 0.5, and country's about 0.9. Almost 1% of the population in this country, when you annualize it, will be homeless. And research basically says that, and we found it the same, people show up, they're an average of 33 days if they stay less than 6 months, and 41% will leave within 33 days with no financial assistance. They just need some case management, they need some assistance, some networking, and to stabilize a little bit, and off they go, and we never see them again. We'll have about 53 or 4% that will need about $3,500 for about 3 or 4 months, rent assistance, utility deposit, first month deposit, and lo and behold, they will be gone. And we'll have about 8 or 9 or 10% that will come back 2 or 3 times, and we have about 5 to 6% that need permanent supportive housing. They need to go in a place where they have case management, and it will be case managed for a year or 2 or 3. There's about 5 or 6% that are chronically homeless families. So, basically, homelessness is a temporary situation for the bulk. And that's why, when this research was done in the late 1990s, that, wow, 10% are chronically homeless. We need to segment the market. I work for a Ford Motor Company in the Detroit area. So you had the luxury car buyers, and you had the Pinto buyers, the new kids, the kids out of college, newly minted college graduates. They'd buy a Pinto. You want to give them a Pinto, and so price was a big issue. Then you want to upgrade them to a Ford, not an LTD, but Torino, and then eventually you want to get them into a Lincoln, because that's lots of money made on that. So you had to segment the market. Well, the same thing occurs for the homeless. What is the need of those individuals? Different interventions work for different folks. So rapidly rehousing families works very well. So this kind of gives you an overview, and so when you annualize, about almost 3 million people would be homeless in the United States. So does this kind of frame it for you and contextualize it? Comments, questions, issues, concerns?
Well, the problem here is if you see something about a homeless person in the newspaper, so often they're called transients.
Yes. You have transients here, do you?
Oh, yeah.
How many do you have?
Oh, I don't know. Lots.
Maybe there's
But you
3.
don't hear
Maybe
them-
there's 3.
You don't hear them referred to as homeless, though.
Right, okay. So we had the same thing, and I'm sure, yes, sir.
First asked the question, could you repeat the question?
Right. She said in the paper here, they talk about transients. Those are the homeless folks. And we've also heard, if you build it, they will. Therefore, we don't want to build it, because then they won't come. And lo and behold, 75 to 80% of your people are Idahoans that are homeless. We had that. The LDS Church has a Welfare Square program. Utah has been one of the top states through the whole recession. We're 3 percentage points basically below the unemployment rate all through the recession. I think we're now at 2.9 or 3 or 3.1. We're still 3 percentage points below the national unemployment. And this gets touted across the country, and people hear that and what? They come to Utah because of jobs. and they throw everybody in the car, and they get there and they just barely make it. So they show up at Welfare Square, they need some help, and yes, they do become homeless, but they can become homeless, or they show up there because of jobs. So we know they do come, and our government is very committed to improving the economy and building it up and all those kinds of things, and that's very important and very good. At the same time, it draws them. That's just a fact of life. And they hear about Welfare Square. They can get there and get some assistance. The LDS Church helps a lot in the welfare program. So, yeah, they do move. They are transits, but we figure about 20% will flow through. I mean, if I were a homeless person, I'd come to Idaho and Oregon and Washington in the summer, and where would I go for the winter?
Florida.
Well, Arizona. Well, you'd go to Florida, okay. Many of them go to Arizona, San Diego. Yes, that is a reality. There are transients. But as I said yesterday, it's very important, and I'll emphasize this again and again. They are not they are us. They're our citizens. So stop calling them they, may I suggest, strongly. When you start saying they and you objectify them, it separates you from them, and you are better than them. And I've come to understand you can learn from them as much as they can learn from you when you develop a relationship. And they're your citizens and my citizens. Get over it and calling them they. Stop it. I had to make a shift, a paradigm shift. Because I call them they. And on the ranch, I'd say, you bums and you hobos, get a job. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Well, I've come to understand they don't have boots. They can't pull themselves up. I was down at the prison, this beautiful young lady, third time back from the prison, she's probably 23, 24. She was sharing her story. She said, at age 7, my dad taught me how to use drugs. And I can tell you many more stories. Age 7, the person who's supposed to protect and educate and teach taught how to use drugs. Now, if you'd been taught how to use drugs at age 7, where do you think you might be now?
Addict. Talking about they or us, I remember several years ago, there was a thing on one of the news stations that said, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it said most of us are 2 weeks away, possibly,
Sure.
from being homeless. Has that figure stayed the same over the years?
It's
or
gone
has
to 2.2 weeks. I don't know, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm 50 miles away from Boise, so I'm an expert. No, that is true. A lot of us are a paycheck away. And I've heard that, but I haven't seen any research of late. But that is an issue. So, all I'm just saying is, you need to be and take a look. Should I tell my paradigm shift?
Yes.
Okay, I had a paradigm shift in how I looked at the homeless population. I was out in my backyard. I was working away. My neighbor was weed whacking out there, and he had his grass growing up, and so he was going along, and he had his headphones on, and he tripped over a little stump that had grown up, and his weed whacker went over, and his cat had crouched down in the grass, and the weed whacker cut off the cat's tail. And it startled him, and he put down his weed whacker, took off his headphone, went over and picked up the tail, went over and got the cat, got out his handkerchief and put the handkerchief on the stubby end of the tail, and came over to me and says, Lloyd, would you take me down to Walmart? I said, Walmart? Why Walmart? There's an animal hospital on the way there. And he said, why wouldn't I go to Walmart? It's the world's largest retailer. So I had a paradigm shift. Okay? All right, you have a homeless plan. Yes?
Did they draw a line between the term homeless versus transient?
Nope. Did we draw a line between homeless and transient? We really can't tell.
The reason I was asking is I have been labeled transient, and the funny thing is, I haven't left Treasure Valley.
You haven't left where?
I haven't left this Treasure Valley area. I haven't left Boise, Nampa, Colorado.
So he's been labeled as transient, but has never left Treasure Valley. So you just transient around Treasure Valley.
Well, I've lived, in Boise and Nampa, Caldwell, wherever my work was.
Okay, well, it depends how you define transient. He's lived in Boise, Nampa, and where they have a spread in Nampa. They now can build up in Nampa density. But anyway, so no. So how do you then determine who's transient, who's homeless, who's a Utahn, who's an Idahoan, and everything else? We don't know the difference. And there's no label on us that says, bingo, I'm a transient. Treat me differently.
Americans.
We should be Americans, right. Okay, you have a plan. Has it worked as expected? As I was putting this together, I was thinking, all right, I'm talking to a group here. What do you want to accomplish? Now we have a pretty diverse group here. What are your priorities?
And homelessness.
Is it a priority to end homelessness? You've had a plan. You're working on it, yes! I like it.
That 10-year plan's been rotated, to my knowledge, just since I've been here, 2.5 times.
Okay, plan's been rotated 2.5 times. What are the chronic homeless costing you? Well, are you willing to repurpose current funding? See, when we started out, and I went around the state, I would go to the rural areas especially, and they would say, we're going to work on providing housing to all the chronic homeless people. And the first question was, or first comment was, give us more money. I said, no, we're not going to give you more money because you'll continue to do what?
Work on it.
Work on it, the same thing you've been doing that hadn't been working. Ergo, so I'm not willing to go to the legislature or some funders and say, give us $5 million and we're going to do this new plan. I said, we're going to take the existing money, the $3.5 million we have, and we're going to make sure that that money is focused on the new vision and we're getting the results that we expect. So for the next 3 or 4 years, we were repurposing those funds into our vision statement, which was everyone has access to safe, decent, affordable housing with the needed resources and supports for self-sufficiency and well-being.
Say again?
Everyone has access to safe, decent, affordable housing with the needs and resources and supports for self-sufficiency and well-being. Now, what does that say? Everyone has access to safe, decent, affordable housing. I have it coming up on a slide. What does that say? Everyone has access to safe, decent, affordable housing with the needed
There's no
resources and supports for
distinction.
self-sufficient well-being.
There's no distinction.
There's no distinction. And as a community, we're committed to what?
Housing first.
Giving them a housing opportunity. Because the very minute that I say we're going to end chronic homelessness, and then we publicize, which Phoenix did in December, they were in competition with Salt Lake. We didn't want to be in competition, but we got put in competition. They then announced broadly, the mayor went out and says, we have ended chronic veterans homelessness. We didn't do that. We didn't want to do that because guess what happened in January and February? The press ate him alive. We went down and we looked at the campus. There's all kinds of homeless down there. And there's all kinds of homeless vets. They may not have been chronically homeless vets, but they were homeless vets. And then they found some that had chronically homeless vets. But he had gone out and announced, we have ended chronic homelessness, veterans. That's a mixed message. Then they said, well, these typical politicians, they just set a goal and they accomplished it and they're moving on and forget about. And so they ate him alive. We don't ever want to claim that we have ended chronic homelessness. We are willing to say we have given a housing opportunity to every chronically homeless person and homeless veteran by the end of 2015. And we're modifying our HMIS to identify that and to track it. As a community, that's what we can realistically do. But Gene here still has his choice to stay on the street. And why would Gene stay on the street?
That's where he's comfortable.
That's where he's comfortable. He has severe mental illness. He's a SPIMI, severely and persistently mentally ill. And 4 walls drives him nuts. And he goes in there, and then he will be all by him lonesome. Out on the river, he has who? Friends,
Nature.
his dog. And you're who?
Mother Nature.
Mother Nature. He likes it there. He was a veteran. He camped in Vietnam. He's okay. He's a mountain man.
Yep.
And he's okay with that. Am I okay with that? Sure. We'll come by, we'll bring you some socks. We may do some medical treatment because we have a triage comes out and looks at medically how you're doing. Watch for frostbite. Why don't you come on in at least for the winter, the cold nights? Yeah, I'm okay. Okay, we use your sleeping bag. It's his choice. Doesn't hurt anybody. We honor that. Yes, sir.
One of the things, working with the homeless, there are like 3 levels. The veterans, there are 4 levels. There's the government, there's veterans, there's the state, there's the county, and then there's the city.
Yep.
And
And then there's the service providers.
yeah, and what these service providers, right, live off the, I guess the fairness of each one of these. Some off the city, some off the county, some off the state. But the point is that there seems to be a disconnect. It's like 3 kingdoms that work completely on their own without sharing. Like the counties and the cities, 2 different separate,
Mm-hmm.
never together. The state isn't involved. So there's kind of a disconnect.
Okay.
And what we have is we have a lot of people spending a great deal of time and money on these things, but there's no overall.
Yep. Oh, you have a 10-year plan.
And that, I think, that is the.
Okay.
area-
So you have identified a very important opportunity for you to work on.
You sound like my priest.
Okay. So he's basically saying that there's many levels: the state government, the county government, the city government, and then there's the public, and then there's service providers. And there appears to be a disconnect. So, is that unusual in Idaho? No. It's very important you begin to identify what the issues are. Once you have the issues identified, then coming to a common vision is absolutely crucial. And I talked about that yesterday. If you don't get a common vision and committed to it, you're going to just work on it. So, you're an important part of the discussion. And I would say don't complain about it and be a shrill voice and throw stones at the state or the city or the county. You get together and you educate them and you say, look, these are our citizens, and you help them. And it may not be you that carry the message. It may be Gene here that carries the message in there to say, all right, we need to do something different. All I'm pointing up is it can be done. You can do it. You need a common vision, and you need some champions committed to making it happen. If you don't get those, it ain't going to happen, is my experience. Yes, ma'am.
So you pointed out the world of limited resources.
Yep.
And that you focused a priority on chronically homeless, which I think we can all understand the economic benefits of
Yep.
that. But to your point, if we're focusing on that, then maybe we're reducing opportunity services for the not chronically homeless.
Could be.
So have you been able to go back upstream where some of the savings are in terms of at the hospital level or shelter savings to be able to bring some of those dollars back around?
Okay, going upstream because you prioritize them. We've been able to bring a little bit of that, not to the point that we want. So yes, it is a painful process. When we started to repurpose our funds, there are a lot of good things that our Homeless Trust Fund was doing. Rehabbing houses when people were disabled and needed wheelchairs, so you expanded the bathroom, OSHA, ramps, all good stuff. And it was all, we will prevent homelessness. Well, we said, no, that isn't working towards our goal of chronic homelessness. So there's a hue and cry, woe is me. So we repurposed. We were committed to that. But what, 2 or 3 things that came out of that. We have improved the overall system. Our family stay in the shelter has gone from 67 days to 33 days. Because as we looked at this, we looked at how we could streamline the system. And when you take Gene out, he now goes in shelter. Oh no, it was Alan, sorry. Alan. We take Alan out and we put him into housing. We could put 10.5 people in that same bed. We put over 1,000 people into permanent supportive housing. We converted hundreds of beds who Alan was sleeping in, the chronically homeless, for the families. And so when he had that blip, that big increase during the recession, we had a huge increase in families. We didn't need more motel. We don't use motel vouchers. We were able to use those beds that the chronic homeless have been doing. We were able to absorb that. We improved the overall system by repurposing, prioritizing, and looking at our system. Now, also, research is saying, we just finished a study, if you have 100 people who get eviction notice, and so they come in and say, oh, I got eviction notice, woe is me, help me do that, and so you put money into all 100, and you feel good about it, and you spend a ton of money, but research shows that if 100 people have eviction notice, 6 will show up at the shelter if you don't give them any assistance. Just 6. Or 10. Another study was 10. Ours is 6. So, eviction notice doesn't mean they'll become homeless. The problem is we don't know which 6 will show up. So we basically made the decision, when they present at the shelter, they've already gone through doubled up, burned their bridges, and they show up at the shelter. Then we rapidly rehouse them, assess them, and in 33 days, they're out into their own facility. So there are some tough decisions you'll need to make of how you use your limited resources. You'll never have enough money. Never. The social scientists and the service providers can dream up tons of services that could be done for the folks. There's some accountability issues. Those that are way over here say the government should be responsible for everything, they should fix everything, they should have all this money and give everybody housing if they show up as homeless. I don't believe that. You have over here, don't give them any money, you just improve the economy and they'll get a job and they'll be happy. No, we need to be over here because all of our chronic homeless people pay 30% of their income, and if they trash the place, rowdy to their neighbors, beat them up, they're evicted. Just like anyone else. There is some accountability that belongs to the homeless people. And some need to be evicted because they need to realize, whoo, I can't do that anymore. Just like your children. Many of these are children in adult bodies. They never got past 10 or 11 or 12 because of all this trauma in their life. So stop calling them they. They're just children in adult bodies that were traumatized, taught how to use drugs, beaten up, sexually abused, molested, verbally abused. And so go talk to one, get to know them. I invite all of you to go find a chronically homeless person and sit down and get to know them and have them tell you your story. It will change your life. It will change your life. Stop calling them they. They're your brother, your sister, may I suggest. All right, that's all background. We're going to start now for the presentation. Utah's approach. Okay, now, what I'm going to say one more time. He's raised very valid issues. They're common issues. We have some county commissioners. I have met with them. I've educated them. Not interested at all. Do I stop? No, I plow around them. You have a big stump in the field, you plow around it. You may not get all the harvest you want because they have that big stump in the field. But you plow around it. And you take out the small stumps and you still grow your harvest. Now eventually they're going to say, maybe I ought to join to the group. Yeah, they seem to be doing okay. I think take some credit for this. So county committee. And they don't get elected and they don't run. And we get a new one who now says, yeah, this is a pretty good deal. If you have 10% of a population committed to an idea, this was done by Polytech Institute, it takes 10% of the population committed to an idea, and in a short time period, committed to that common belief, it will become the belief of the majority in a period of time. 10%. You can make it happen. It's just an opportunity. It's a challenge. If it were easy, everybody would do it. So get over it's going to be easy. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be exciting. Matter of fact, you're going to have conflict. In the book, Magic of Conflict, it says, if you don't have conflict, you'll never generate the energy to make the needed change. Conflict is part of the process. Embrace it. Changing the status quo is going to take some energy. Who has the energy to begin to deal with the conflict that's going to be raised? That's part of the process. To me, that excites me. That says, how do I work through and we'll go around this stump? What is the innovative way that I can deal with this? I enroll people. I enroll the other side. I strive to be a spiritual-oriented person. I see these homeless people as brothers and sisters. That they're truly my brother and sister. So I enroll the Supreme Being, the other people on the other side, and put them to work. I'm a creator. And then they can work through me because I happen to be here right now in mortality. So I invite that. And you'll be amazed at the ideas that show up. Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you. I'll go out and implement that now. When you move from barrier orientation to solution orientation, it's a paradigm shift. Get over the barrier. There will be barriers, but move to a solution orientation. You can't believe the people that would say, whoa, Lloyd, that can't be done. Woe is me. Woe is me. Look at this barrier. Look at this barrier. Woe is me. I said, when we were doing our first pilot, okay, I hear it. In our meeting in 2 weeks, you tell me what you need to house 5 people, chronically homeless people, by August 1st. Well, we can't do that. Well, no, I didn't ask that. You come back in 2 weeks, tell me what you need to house 5 people. This was the pilot of the pilot. And I will go get it. I personally will go get it. You tell me what you need. So I challenged them. I was tired of them being barrier-oriented and saying, whoa, that can't be that, and this is tough, and woe is me. I said, no. They came back in 2 weeks, and when they'd shifted their thinking to say, I need to get 5 people housed, who are the 5? They said, well, there's no barriers. We can do it. Now, it took us 3 or 4 days to find someone. They'd gotten so soused, they had to go find them on the river, and then take them through the detox center in order to put them into housing. So by August 11th, we had 5 of them housed. But when I finally said, enough is enough, 2 weeks, tell me what you need, we'll get it, we'll make it happen. Now, Sam Sambaris, who developed this idea, came out in June, and by August 11th, we had people housed. He said, I've never seen anybody do it as quick as Utah. Because we said, hey, sounds like a good idea, let's try it. And I've learned you can study it, and you can plan it, and you can meet, and you can meet, and you can meet. But I found that in about 2 months, you'll pretty well thunk through all of the things that you need to do, then start doing. And you'll tweak it as you go. Start doing. There's something magic about action. Start doing. So I'm being pretty strong here, because I was here in 2008, conveying about, a little different because I have more experience, but it's basically the same thing. You as a group here can make it happen. Now, you have different interests. You have refugees. You have all kinds of things. You have city. Anybody here from the county? Anybody here from the state? Okay, you have opportunities to educate more folks. I'm willing to come back because I'm committed to this. You can do it. All right, here we go. Here's what we did organizationally. In this Thomas Crum book, so when your vision is crystal clear, taking action happens naturally. Until you get a crystal clear vision, you're going to muddle around, and you're going to meet, and you're going to meet, and you're going to meet. If you had an earthquake here, it'd be a crystal clear vision. You have to recover, you have to, rescue, recovery, whatever. It's crystal clear. Resources pop up. As soon as you make it crystal clear about your chronically homeless, your homeless vets, you'll get the resources when you're committed to it. So a crystal clear vision is absolutely crucial. All right, here's our state vision. Because we said at the beginning, as a community, we're committed to this. We cannot get Alan or Gene to come in. We want to develop a relationship, and we'll go out and we'll work with him. And we'll invite him, and we'll invite him. We want a system in place as soon as somebody's becoming long-term homeless. Well, any homelessness, we'll rapidly rehouse them. Our system's getting so much better. Our resources are being used. So we rapidly rehouse families. You got those that are chronically homeless families. They need this kind of housing. We're fine-tuning how many units do we need. But we're still reaching out to Gene. There's one guy that I was told about in Houston. Outreach workers went out every day and talked to Gene. Every day and sometimes twice a day. And on the 767th invitation, he said, okay, I'll come into housing. They didn't give up. If we say, oh, we talked to Gene, he's not interested, all right, I won't see him anymore. No. Gene's a citizen. He's a voter. He's a human being.
Veteran.
A veteran. He's one of us. Invite him into your life, your thinking, your prayers, meditation, whatever you do. When you open up and begin to receive that which can come to you, lo and behold, Gene will be softened and he'll say, yeah, I'll come in. We have a hard time thinking, why wouldn't anybody want housing? We just offer them housing. They say, well, thank you, I've been waiting for you. No, he has other issues. Einstein said, if you want to do peace, what was it?
Nothing can be achieved by force. It must be through understanding.
Nothing can be achieved by force. It must be achieved by understanding. You don't get peace by forcing it. It's understanding. So that's our vision. I'm committed to that. Now, we don't know how many will reject it. It may be 3%, 4%, 5%. That's one of the things over the next 12, 18 months we want to identify. How many will say, no, not now? I won't give up, but we know there's going to be some functional zero. Okay, okay, we had 20,000. I've talked about that. We had one guy, 2010 ER cost $563,000. One guy, ER visits alone. There was more because there's EMT runs. These were just ER visits. Expensive guy. And we had one over a 3-year period, $937,000. One of our home chronically homeless people. These are real costs. Now, I sent this slide to Greg. So for those interested, you can get a copy if you want. Okay, so our 2005 counts, 11,000 unsheltered, 13,600, 5/10 of population, 1,932 chronics, we're down to 495, we're down 74%. Now, these are getting tougher. The diminishing returns concept. When we heard about 10%, we said, nah, that's New York. Yeah, we don't know if that's true in Utah. So we came back to our largest shelter, and we took, and this is as of 2012, I might have a 13, but we drop a year and add a year. So we move it's a 5-year pie chart we're dealing with. But we're basically running about 1,000,002, 1,003,000, 1,004,000, 1,005 bed nights in this one shelter. And 1,900,000 plus unduplicated individuals. And we basically found, this has been 14%, it's down to 12, 13, 14%, consumes 63-4% of the bed nights. So when we came back from this study in 2003, we went to this conference to say, telling us about the 10-year plan. Because when I went to that conference in Chicago, I said, you guys are smoking something. You're dreaming. There's no way you're going to end chronic homelessness in 10 years. Ha, ha, ha. I berated them. Said, you're silly. What are you doing? You're out of your mind. So when I went there and spent 4 days listening to the research, listening to the Housing First and their experience, when I flew out of Chicago, I can still see myself sitting in that. I happened to get a window seat. I hate window seats. Or I don't like window seats. I don't hate them. I don't like them. I was looking out on the clouds and I said to myself, self, if any state can provide housing to the chronically homeless, it's the state of Utah. I made a paradigm shift. I became converted. I said it could be done. There were 9 of us that went. I knew it could be done. Now, I wasn't in charge of anything. I was working for another organization. I happened to be working for the LDS Church. I got loaned out. The governor went and got me loaned out. I was still doing my full-time job at the church. And I did on part-time. They let me use I had a pretty good-sized staff, and they had some extra time, so I was able to use them. I ended up drafting the plan, getting it bought off. We reorganized the State Homeless Coordinating Committee. We took it from a bunch of service providers to policy folks with the lieutenant governor chairing it and cabinet-level people sitting on it, because we need policy folks in the discussion. Now, was there some hue and cry? Yeah, woe is me, I don't want to be off that. And I said, you're going to go to a subcommittee. Woe is me. Sorry, you're on a subcommittee. I was nice about it. Some of them just floated off because there was a change, there was conflict, but I said, if we're going to make this happen, it's got to be at this level. Not a bunch of service, good as you are, lovely as you are, you don't make the decisions for resources. You just spend them. So keep working there and do your job. That's your segment. But we need the cabinet level and we need the lieutenant governor in the discussion. And bank presidents and other kinds of people. So we changed the structure of that committee. So we said, whoop, works in Utah. So we kind of got over that and said, all right, we need to go to work on those same concepts. Just another way. So basically, 1%, 36% that stay 7 days or less use one bed. I mean, each bed represents 7.5 beds. This is the model. So 36% stay 7 days or less. So this is our shelter. Over here, 12% take all those beds in the shelter, 60% of the beds. So when I take Alan out of here, lo and behold, I can put in here all of these. So we were just shifting these beds from 64% down to 60%. This has gotten better since 2013. We increased the flow. The emergency shelter has become an emergency shelter, not a housing program for the chronically homeless. So, 184 beds been converted, 10.7. Oh, I said 10.5. I mean that's an economic sell. So we have lieutenant governor. We're on our fourth lieutenant governor. The current one, he got the previous governor, lieutenant governor after the election. Then he said, "I've got to go make some more money." They want to make $105,000, and he said, "I've got some stuff." So he left, and we got a brand new guy. Now, he was out of rural Utah, knew nothing about homelessness. So I knew the secretary, so I got up there and went up and met with him and said, "All right, here's part of your responsibilities to chair this committee. Here's who we are. Here's what you do. And we want to give you a tour." Busy. You know, this was like 3 weeks after he'd been appointed and approved. So we got December. We got 4.5 hours. He was willing to give us 4.5 hours. So we took him through 8 facilities. And when we went through the homeless shelter, he says, "I don't know if I should tell you this, but I slept in that bed last night." I said, "What?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I didn't know anything about homelessness. I wanted to learn more." So I and one of the legislators, that's a friend of mine, we checked into the shelter last night at 10:30, changed their name, and we went through the whole process and slept in bed. I said, "I met some really interesting characters. They taught me how to use drugs if I wanted to shoot up." I said, "No, I'm okay." And so he learned all kinds of things. He said, "I'm a little tired," because he didn't get a lot of sleep. He was a little nervous. He was in a bunk, and the legislature was in the bunk below him. And they went at 10:30 because they didn't want to see if there are any empty bunks, then they could go in, because if they're all full, they wouldn't have gone in. But there's some empty bunks, so he went in. I says, "Whoa, yes!" Now, when he came to the next homeless coordinating committee, he shared that. Do you think that sent a message to the cabinet level folks? Yeah. And we prepped him, and so he kind of gave him a little pep talk. And I drafted an email, and he sent it out to them saying, "Now, I want you to come back with a 1-page summary of these questions answered." And guess who's calling us now? We had a couple, 3 department heads that weren't really engaged in the game. They're getting engaged in the game because their boss said, "I want you to come and give a report." So they're coming to us to say, "Help us put this report together." So he doesn't need to do a lot, but an email. Once in a while I had previous ones sign a letter, send out to some county commissioners, say, "Oh, yeah, is the governor's office really behind this? Lieutenant Governor Herbert, would you be willing to sign this letter?" "Sure." So it doesn't need to be a lot, but those leaders can have a lot of influence. So financial institutions, the housing authorities, the housing corporation, which is like this one, has the tax credits, balances, all 3 balance of states are on there, faith-based organization, philanthropic, county government. These are the State Department, the homeless liaison, a very powerful legislator or advocate, corrections, Department of Health, workforce services. They're all part of this process. We've organized a discharge. We had these together at one time, the mental health, substance abuse, foster care, and juvenile justice in prisons and jails. It just didn't work. They're just different populations, so we split it out. And jails are very different than prisons, so we're remodifying this because this hasn't worked as well as it needs to. But the letter going to the head of corrections is the new head of corrections. They're now coming saying, "Yeah, we need to rethink this." Because the governor has charged all of his department heads to improve some key outcomes by 25% by 2017. And the correction said we want to reduce our recidivism rate by 25%. Now that causes a rethinking of the process. So the governor sent that out and said, "I want you to have it," because 2017 is the end of his current term. So they're now rethinking how, and it isn't just a tweaking, it's a wholesale change of how we go about dealing with some of these service providers issues. Then we have housing, we have domestic violence case management, training, education, we have an information system. And then I learned that it was very important because, I don't know if it happens in Idaho, but everybody out in the rural says Boise or Salt Lake. They think we have to go to meetings there all the time. And it's shorter from Blanding, the Four Corners area, to Salt Lake than it is from Salt Lake to Blanding, because state people don't go out there to meet. They expect them to come in to meet, 6-hour drive. And I'd heard that over the years, and so I said, okay, in this case, we're going to have local engagement. And I'd learned that if you didn't have a political leader involved, you were going to be in trouble. So I just made up the rule. Everybody thought it was some legislative rule. And I just said, no, we're going to have everybody chair a committee. It's going to be an elected official. That's what we said. So it kind of just became adopted as, oh, that's the rule of the state. It's kind of funny to go out and hear them say, oh, the state requires us to have elected official. I said, yeah, it is. I just said, you need to have an elected official. So that's how it got into the basis. It was kind of funny to see when it does come from Salt Lake, it's like, whoa, Salt Lake. I just made it up. But
Don't tell anybody that.
I won't. If anybody from Utah comes up, don't tell them. I thought it'd be about 8 of these as I went around the state, and ended up being 12. So we have county commissioners, mayors, one place a city councilman. And it's taken 8 years in one place to finally get them to come to what I think is a real engaged process. 8.5 years. Just kept going down there and just kept pushing, kept working, kept working, kept working. And it's aligning. It's really exciting to see it happen after 8.5 years. You don't give up. There's a timing to all these. So we call it centrally led but locally developed. Each of these have a 10-year plan based upon the state 10-year plan. And when they come in and ask for funding, it has to go through these committees and they prioritize it. The continuum of care funding, the homeless trust fund funding, the emergency solutions grant funding goes through those committees. We have driven it into there that they become engaged in prioritizing the funding. And I went out and attended every one of these meetings. A lot of windshield time. 6 hours down to Blanding, one way, back. It's a 2-day trip. I became part of their team. They saw me as part of their solution, and then if they had other issues, they'd call me and say, we need some help with the state government. Can you track some stuff down? Sure, I'd be glad to. They saw me as one of their community persons. I was willing to invest a lot of windshield time to get them to come along with this new vision. So, elected official, this is the local homeless coordinating committee, and anybody that had a dog in the fight locally were invited to be on the local homeless coordinating committee. Now, this is one chart. Here's the state homeless coordinating committee, the subcommittees. Here's all the funding, state, private, federal, all is federal. There is a consolidated housing plan, the continuum of care. We drive everything into the local homeless coordinating committees, elected official, 10-year plan, local 10-year plan to take this person off the street and put him over here into housing. That one chart basically puts it all together. The state stuff, all the funding, federal, state, local, private, run through here against their plan and do that. That make sense? Here's the state broken up through the whole process. Here's the Four Corners area, Blanding down here, right down in here. Beautiful part of the state, desert, but beautiful. Okay, well, we did our pilot because we had a housing authority that had property, and they were trying to decide, do we build 100 units? And they were saying, wow, I'm going to take 100 chronic. They'd gone to Seattle, and they'd seen some of these housing first. And they said, whoa, 100 Allens and Jeans in one place, it will be chaos. And it happened, one of those magical moments. I happened to be walking by my boss's office, and they're having a meeting about this. They pulled me in as I sat there and listened. As I listened, and they were going through agonizing, woe is me. And this idea popped into my head. Oh, why don't we just take $150,000 of our current money and do a pilot and work on 25 of these, end up being 17, while you build this? And everybody, it's one of those epiphanal moments. Everybody said, let's do it. The decision was made at that moment, at 10:30 in the morning. By 11, we were done, and we committed $150,000. We'll find 25, and I said we're going to take the most challenging ones we can find, and while we build this for the next 24 months. And that magical moment occurred. The lady, is the housing authority lady here? She didn't come. You're not the executive director. But you're important and very powerful. And she said, we're having our annual Section 8 landlord luncheon. Great, can I come and talk? Sure. So we left the meeting, went over to the place, and they had like 50 landlords there, they're Section 8, and they're, you know, thank you, honoring them, blah, blah, blah. So when they got done, I said, Lloyd wants to talk to you, and I introduced me, and so I got up and said, we're starting a new process. We want to take and we want to work on housing chronically homeless folks. So this is what we're going to be doing. We're looking at this. And so we're looking to house 25. And so when I said, so we're looking for some landlords, and so what do you think the discussion went? I want to take Alan here, who's been on the street for 15 years, mental health issues. Gene hasn't quite been willing to do that yet. And so you're now a landlord. You're a good landlord.
Thank you.
You're not a slum landlord. And your name is?
My name is Todd.
Todd. Okay, so Todd. What are your concerns? I'm come to you and I want Alan to come into your apartment.
Well, if he's been out on the street for so long, he's probably not fit to live indoors.
That may be, but we don't know yet, so we want to try it out. So what are your other concerns, Todd?
And is he going to get along with the other people living there?
Okay, now we have this young lady here. Your name? Tell me.
Christina.
Christina. She's a very good case manager. And she's going to case manage Alan and help him work through that. So 24/7, you can call Christina.
Okay, that helps.
All right, what next?
Who's going to pay his rent? Is
The
that-
housing authority lady over here in this purple sweater is going to, aren't you the housing authority? She's going to master lease. So every first of the month, on the first day, you're going to get your check.
Okay, I'm running out of concerns now.
Any other concerns?
Can't think of any.
What? Damage. We've set aside a chunk of money, and any damage that Alan does, we'll repair.
That certainly helps.
Okay, will you rent Alan?
How many people is he gonna let stay there?
Okay, so if there's challenges, Christina's going to come over and help him realize that his buddies can't stay. The damage we did have came from his friends, not him. There wasn't much. So that is an issue. So Christina is really good. Can you see how good she is? She's going to help him realize that.
Okay.
I can't pay my utilities.
That's in the rent that she's going to pay. Can you do drugs in your apartment? Who said that? Can you do drugs in your apartment?
Can I do drugs in my apartment?
Now? Yeah, he can too. Can you drink in your apartment?
Yes, I can.
He can too. But what if you get rowdy and soused and rowdy and whatever?
Then my neighbors.
They'll call the police. They'll call him on him also. And then Christina will get a call.
So
So-
Alan's not going to get any special privileges living in my
He's going to
place.
pay 30% of his income also. We're going to give him disability insurance. He's going to pay 30%. So he's going to be accountable. Christina's going to work with him.
So do you only accept chronically homeless that have a disability check?
Well, he doesn't have a disability check yet. For a while, she's going to cover all the rent.
What if he can't, what if he doesn't get a disability check?
Well, then, if he doesn't have a disability, he shouldn't be chronically homeless. We'll work with him. We're on the SOAR program to help them within 3 or 4 months to get him on disability.
There could be people that don't have a disability, like through a doctor, but they have a disability, so they're chronically homeless.
Sure, but the disability should meet the SSDI disability requirements. Now, we also have a general assistance program. We'll get him on that. We'll get him on food stamps. We'll get him on the mainstream resources so he has some income he can live. We'll tie him into the food pantry. So we had this discussion, and we answered all the questions and said, how many are willing to be the landlord? And they raised, about 25 raised their hand. Then we said, we want you to lower your rent by $50. I said, okay. And off we went. We had the money set aside. We had the landlords. And then the next 2 months, 2.5 months, we got the case managers together, and we identified 25 of the most chronically homeless people we could find. And by August 11th, 5 were housed. Off we went. And 22 months later, all 17 were still housed. We had one that came in the first night. They slept on the floor and put their stuff on the bed. The next 3 or 4 nights, they went out and slept by the dumpster. They've been on the street so long. They came back in the apartment and slept on the floor for several days before they finally got on the bed. Christina came by and said, "It's cold in here." "I don't know, I know, it is just cold." "Well, have you turned up the heat?" Turn up the heat. "Yeah, see this little thing on the wall? You go, choop, and you turn up the, oh, I didn't know." They've been on the street so long. Since they were a kid, and they didn't turn up the heat, the parents did. They didn't know how to turn up the heat. "17 were housed. Now thousands, hundreds are housed." We became believers. The most toughest ones we could find stayed housed. Okay, we can do it. Get over it. They're human beings. They're problem solvers. If you end up on the street, you're going to go to Alan and say, "Alan, how do you survive?" He's going to teach you how to survive. He's a problem solver. He has gifts. He has talents. He can do it. You can do it. All right. The next year we built 24. This is chronic homeless housing. Look pretty nice?
Beautiful.
Next year we took a Holiday Inn, 291 rooms, and converted them into some 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So we have 201 rooms. We have 280 chronically homeless individuals in this place. Yes?
How do you, I don't want to say get around, but how do you work with the fair housing issue? Assuming by your definition chronically homeless are a protected class, because they may have disabilities. How do you work with the concept of clustering?
That's allowed. We've discussed with HUD, and so this is the preferred. And so the housing authority, you in the purple shirt, you can take some. You and your executive director can take some of your Section 8 vouchers, and you can preference them, and you can have a chronic homeless waiting list, and you can put them in there. So we had our housing authorities are very involved. We've had no issue with that. We've been audited.
Your fair housing
Right.
group is not.
Right. Yep. It's happened all across the country. Now, we can use all kinds of things. Well, we can't do that because of this rule. No, take a look. How do you solve it?
Is this considered their permanent housing, or is this?
Permanent housing. Permanent housing. They'll stay there till they die. Now, we have about a 15% turnover rate. We have 6% die. 2% die, I mean. No, this is permanent housing with case management. They need case management. You cannot take Alan and put him in there and say, "Good luck." Alan needs Christina to come by at least once a week and engage him somehow. Not a requirement. Well, when they go into there, we made it a requirement. And these, it's not a requirement, but they engage them all the time. And there's an inspection of the room. It needs to be kept clean. They need to pay 30% of their income. They can't be obnoxious and violent with their neighbors. They'll be evicted. There's accountability. So, this is on 10th South in Maine in Salt Lake City. Yes?
Now, did I hear you correctly on that, to do with the chronically homeless are basically considered to have mental issues? Is that?
No, they have disabling conditions. They may be mental, substance abuse, physical, emotional. It's all of those that are disabling condition. A chronically homeless person is an unaccompanied adult with a disabling condition that's been homeless a year or more or 4 times in 3 years. So the disability can vary. Mental health is a high 40% or so.
So what if they can't get approved for SSDI, but they also can't obtain employment? How long will you guys cover rent until?
They have a Section 8 voucher. Or a tenant-based rental assistance. It's covered. That's permanent housing.
How long is Utah's wait list for Section 8?
It's not, oh, well, no, this is a separate waiting list. This is a chronic homeless waiting list. The list over here is 5 years long, it's closed. This is chronic homeless list.
So it's immediate?
It's not necessarily immediate. We need more housing. We're still working at it. Okay, so then we took a Days Inn, 110 rooms, converted it in 2 months to housing for veterans. Then we built a new stick-built, 50 units, 70 beds for 55 and older. This is the only one that had any NIMBY issue in. Because right behind this building, there's hundreds of school children walk from residential over to a school over here. We had some pushback. So we had to go to the U. We had to hire somebody to do a study. When you get to 30, your crime rate really goes down. 35 and 40 by 55, man, you don't do any crime. So we had to prove that. So they approved it. This has now become one of the primary things that the community comes in, churches come in, youth come in and do service projects. They love them. The children go by. There's this wonderful conversation. The guys have a garden out there in front and they talk. Yeah, it's just been wonderful. It's been a blessing to the neighborhood. Then this just opened up on campus. 72 units. It's leased up last fall. Homeless veterans. This one's coming online. I don't have a good picture. Phase 1. So this one has refugees, youth, and everything else, and some homeless. So we have about 900. Retention rate's 80%. Going out to stabilization, about 10% move out to stable housing. They get reconnect with family. They get a regular Section 8 voucher. They can go out. 6% eviction rate, die, 2% unknown leave. This is after several years. That's a pretty good eviction rate. When you take the Allens and the Jeans, the toughest you can find, and you put them into housing. Now, we have found that Allen may not do well in his first place. So we say, look, okay, now we want you to stay housed. So we're going to move you over to Palmer Court from Grace Mary Manor. And they had one in Palmer Court that's going to go over to Grace Mary Manor because sometimes the case manager style is an issue. And they go over and that takes really well. We've had a couple that's taken the third move and they say, wow, they're really serious. They care for me. They want me to stay housed. And lo and behold, it takes. Now some of them, they need to be kicked out. And back onto the street, okay, they're serious. I have some accountability, some responsibility. Yes, sir.
Who owns the housing?
The housing authorities own the housing. That one big hotel is owned by the shelter.
Where does this money come from?
It comes from continuum of care, state, private. It's a whole mixture. And it was built with tax credits.
Are they all in Salt Lake?
No, they're in that valley. Some are in West Valley City, some are in South Salt Lake, some are in Salt Lake.
But in that area?
In that valley, yes.
So it came from
Federal money, state money, private money, foundation money.
And so you talk about all these as one time, we can move them from this unit, this housing complex to this.
Yeah, and they're different organizations that own them. We just worked well together.
Okay, so it isn't just central.
Oh, no, it's not central. They just say, we got somebody here. Alan just isn't working out. When you open up next and we move them over, yeah, so then the next person that's available goes into Alan's slot, but he took a slot that's opened up over in Palmer Court.
And most of these units you're talking about are facilities that are all permanent?
These are all permanent supportive housing. All right.
Lloyd?
Yes.
So you say are some scattered all the way from Ogden down to Provo, or we have about 25 or 30 in Ogden that are scattered site. In addition to those, we have a lot of scattered site in Salt Lake area. So we have project-based and scattered site also. Is it a challenge to get somebody to come from Blanding to the Wasatch Front?
We don't worry about that. They just show up. They hop on some truck. There's no train down there. Well, they get a ride.
Is the primary funding source for the rent, is that a reallocated Section 8 voucher?
Yeah, reprioritize Section 8 voucher. Tenant-based rental assistance coming out of the we didn't get new Section 8 vouchers. Now we have VASH vouchers, veterans vouchers. So yeah, no, the housing authorities, if you don't have the housing authority at the table with you and willing to prioritize that, see, and the pushback comes, well, we have this 5-year waiting list. Yes, you do. But you also have these very expensive people over here, and on this waiting list for 5 years. If you go down probably 150 of those, you may find 3 or 4 that haven't solved the problem. They've solved the problem. They've been at it for 4 years, so they've done something. These people are on the street, so you can prioritize them. So as your vouchers come open, then you say, I'm going to give you 35 this year, 35 next year, 35 the following year for chronically homeless. And HUD encourages that. These are expensive. Folks.
Now, you brought this up earlier, that if you build it, they will come.
Mhm.
And that'll be one of the big arguments in this town, of course. If you make decent housing for these people, we'll get them from all over the country.
Yeah, they'll all come to Boise. They'll flock here in thousands. Yes, thousands.
What have you, just curiosity, what have you found about all this beautiful housing of people coming from all over the country?
It stayed about 75% are Utah residents. We haven't worried about that because most other places around the country are trying to do housing first, permanent supportive housing, and so it's all over. So they come there basically for jobs. See, so you can awfulize all you want, and we've had the awfulizers that have come along, but that we said, well, okay, well, I mean, so we're still going to do it. So you can awfulize and put up all the barriers you want, and then guess what you're going to be doing?
Working on it.
Working on it. Yes, you're going to meet.
We're going to have meetings.
Yes. And we read the plan. We're going to work on it, yes. So here is the total numbers, 13. So we had a bump there. We had a kick up there. We had, this coming down. And the 2014 is coming down about right here. So now the 10%, 11% reduction. We're fine-tuning the numbers. This is this number as a percent of the state population. We track it that way. And then here's our chronic homeless numbers coming down here. These are the chronic homeless numbers as a percent of the homeless population. So we come from 14%, 1932, down to 495. We're at 3.2. This bumps up. This gets kicked up a little bit because what we found is we had the housing authorities have a chronic homeless list, and the large shelter had a chronic homeless list, and we had one in our HMIS. And so I've kind of taken over this spot, and we're forcing all those together. So we have one list for the housing authorities, for the shelter, for everybody, and it's bumped up about 45. So it's up a little bit. But we're getting the system fine-tuned and refined. Okay, housing first. Basically, there's core convictions. You treat them just like you're treated as a tenant. You move people in, without preconditions. They don't have to go through treatment. When they get in there, this is housing. Then you invite them for treatment. And when Alan's ready, Christina's going to work with him. But when he's ready, then he'll go to treatment. But if we force him to go to treatment, guess what? There are women in prison for 5 years. They're dry, clean, and sober. And when they walk out, what do? They go back to drugs because they haven't made the emotional, mental commitment to stay clean. They were clean for 5 years by force. So long term, it may take a little longer, but when Alan says, I'm ready, it'll take. Providers obligated to bring robust, non-coercive supportive services to the housing. Continued tenancy is not dependent upon participation in services. This is permanent housing. Units are targeted to the most vulnerable homeless population in the community. We're getting this one list. We're doing a vulnerability index. Those that score the highest will now get into the housing first that's available. Embraces harm reduction, so progressive engagement. So Alan's now willing to get in. He's willing to go to a group meeting. He's willing to do this. So we'll progressively engage him to the level that he's willing to participate, and eventually he'll be fully engaged. But it's a progressive engagement, harm reduction. When I heard that concept, we're going to give them clean needles, I said, you guys are nuts. You're going to give him clean needles? Well, I now understand the concept. It's a harm, so clean needles so he doesn't get infection. I don't like that, but they're progressively engaged in developing relationships. Well, Alan will say, okay, well now I think I'll get clean. They have lease and tenant protections under the law, can be implemented either project-based or scattered site, and they pay 30% or $50, whichever is greater. So there's some accountability. He may sell his blood for the first few months to get his $50, but he has to pay $50, or he'll be evicted. There's a little, for the first 2 or 3 months, there's a little leniency, but after that, he's expected to pay. It's not free housing. As some headlines have been saying, Utah, a red state, gives people free housing. We had a Japanese correspondent here for 2 weeks, and I found it, and he sent me the Nikkei, it's like the Wall Street Journal. He wrote this big article, and he says, Utah gives homeless free housing. I stressed with him this very point, but he had a bias. He wanted the government over there to give them free housing. So, I need to hurry along. Employment second. We call it housing first, employment second. Housing first, employment second. All assumption, all can be housed. We've made that assumption. Now, all can increase income through employment. Now, a little bit of discussion. Case managers say, no, we can't do that because if we do, then you're going to hold us accountable. They say they wanted this vision statement to be all have access to employment. I said, no. The minute that you think that he, Alan, has achieved the level he can go, you give up on him. It may take 3 years to get Alan to get employed. Even if it's 5 hours a month at minimum wage, he's still increasing his income through employment. He's doing something of value that someone's willing to pay him that's very therapeutic. But the minute that Christina gives up and says, you're part of that 5% that won't do anything, she gives up on him. I'm saying, no, Alan can work and increase his income through employment. And she will always be looking to engage him and engage him and engage him and engage him. We needed to find how we could get employment that would fit his need, not him fit the need of 40 hours a week with benefits. We have to rethink our process. Employment, define the ability and willingness to work at least for a few hours per week for taxable income. Pilot began in 2011. Palmer Court, we moved from like 12% to 35% in 24 months. This is about 300 and some. I haven't updated that. Very tough folks. We got them employed, and we're still doing it. We expanded it out. So we moved it out to the rest of the facilities. And so we basically learned that more on site, so they can come and work custodial, yard work, everything else. We're converting the kitchen in that motel over to a kitchen where we can do food, box lunches and everything else. So that's coming along, so it's on site. Employment's brought in. Oh, we had a social enterprise became part of this, so they then had been working with the mentally ill, so they became part of this process, and we then found that we needed to rethink how we gave employment to them. We had to change. We had to change how we did it. We can't take our traditional approach and apply it to Allen and expect to get there. Hang on a second, I'm going to get through this. Downtown Business Alliance, clean team. We then, down around the shelter, city wasn't cleaning that, so we went to the banks and got some money. We were doing a pilot. They have shelters on, and they have 10 of them go around with their vests on. Twice a day, they clean 10 blocks. Businesses love it. They're homeless in the shelter. They're in these housing units. They're getting experience cleaning. They're getting this exposure. The city threw some money in to buy the containers. 911 calls. When you put Allen there and you put 100 Allens in one spot, guess what the EMT calls go? We may have had the same number of EMT calls spread across the city for the Allens, but we put all the Allens and 100 of them in here. They have an address. And they go, whoa, what is this going on? So we've had this issue. We've been working with the fire. And we basically found that 10% of them make 60 to 80% of the phone calls for the 911. The only number they know is 911. You have to educate them. We're now working to get an on-site medical person to deal with some of those issues. I can expand on that later. Criminal history. 73% of those that are homeless have a criminal history. We're now starting to pilot with the Utah Legal Services. We're finishing the contract this week, next week. We're now saying now that they're housed, getting some employment, and they now want to move on to some other housing, some other employment. Alan's now moved along. Christine's done a wonderful job. He's just ready to go. Now, he has some stuff. He's been clean for 5 years, but you can find he has a criminal history, and they knock him out. So we're now going through and say, we want to expunge his record so that can be moved, so then that removes another barrier. So we're doing a pilot. We're big into pilots. Hot list, warm list. I call them the hot list. Housing opportunity targets. Made it an acronym. Some people didn't like hot, and I said, okay, we'll make an acronym out of it. Housing opportunity targets. This is the one list, the one registry. So everybody has one list. The Housing Authority, everybody else has a list. And we have a warm list that basically says that those that potentially may be chronic get onto the warm list. We'll work with them. We'll assess them and everything else. And when they really become chronically homeless identified, then they'll go on the hot list. And then there'll be vulnerability index done on them. And then the most vulnerable will be housed next. So we're fine-tuning the list, and we're prioritizing lists. So we have about 50 to 70 that will die every year on this, that are homeless. Many of them are in the housing now. The average age is 47. That's been consistent for about 7 years. It's tough on the street. Okay. What are you going to do? What are your concerns? Expanding the homeless effort? Who will be your champions? You need a crystal clear vision. You need some champions. You need to get the state, the county, the city in the same room, come to a common vision. You can work together. They're your citizens, not they or transients. They're us. These are some of the things that I've learned, we've learned, and how we approached it. Any questions?
Lloyd, how have you used national service members to implement some of these programs?
Good idea. Expand on it. How have we done it? Take up in your soapbox and do it. Expand. How do we do it? Go ahead. Stand up.
Sorry. Lloyd's a good friend of mine. I've lived here for about a year. I work with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and we implement AmeriCorps Vista programs as well as Senior Corps throughout the state. And then our Serve Idaho Commission implements AmeriCorps state members. And we worked in Utah with Lloyd, and we put both direct service AmeriCorps state members and AmeriCorps Vista members in Palmer Court, helping residents apply for jobs and apply for housing, learn computer skills, and do some different things like that. So it's a really wonderful partnership. I've got business cards, so hit me up after.
See, and this young man here looks like a college graduate pretty soon. He wants to learn. He wants to go out and get some real life experience. He'll come and volunteer. He'll get education. He'll get a stipend for that. And he gets a year, and he comes with great skills and passion and desire and interest, right?
Kind of.
Kind of. What?
Close. I'm
So
older
yeah.
than you think.
So, and we have guys that are retired and women that are retired become part of it. And they come in and bring their experience, and they work with people coming out of incarceration. They work with the homeless, develop a relationship. Look, there are a ton of resources out there. There are a bunch of college kids here looking for opportunities. When it's organized, tap into it. Look at the solutions. Invite the resources. You invite, the law of the harvest, what you send out is what you get back. If you send out barrier orientation, awfulizing, guess what? You'll find them. If you're looking at solutions, guess what? You'll find it. It's up to you. There's another hand. Yes,
yeah, I just
young
thought,
lady.
Something you said yesterday that was really struck me.
I didn't hit you, did I?
Just
Oh, it was an epiphany.
I was in the front row.
Okay.
Yeah, well, you described it in talking about Alan, the difference in fixing or helping and serving.
You want me to expand on that?
Expand on that.
All right.
And then also the other part was the language, the difference in languages that we
Sure.
bring.
Okay.
I think is real important.
Two kick items. All right. So over the years, I've been a fixer and helper. You know, I mean, I'm energetic. I'm a solution-oriented. You know, hey, I'm here to help you. There's an Australian Aboriginal woman that says, if you come, some humanitarian workers went to Australia to help the Aborigines, and she was very wise. She said, if you've come to help me, you can go home again. But if you see my survival as part of your struggle as we go along, then perhaps we can work together. I go to Mali, Africa as a volunteer, 5th poorest country in the world. I went there originally to help them. It didn't take me very long to realize they're pretty smart. They speak 8 languages. I get along fairly well with English. They aren't dumb. And so I didn't go there to help anymore. I went over there to learn and to share. So, and that's this lady, Naomi, he has a copy if anybody wants a copy. If we help, we see life as weak. If we fix, we see life as broken. If we serve, we see life as whole. Fixing and helping are the work of the ego, and service the work of the soul. And as a Japanese scientist who did some study, he learned how to photograph frozen water, crystals. Maybe some of you read this. And they took water from the same, took it out, and they put a bottle in, they just typed and put love on there, taped it on, kindness, generosity, and then they took some more bottles and they put hate and anger. And when they photographed these, when they froze them, they're beautiful crystals, organized, put together, and over here they're broken apart, disabled, just all chaotic. Same water, they didn't say the word, they just typed it and put it on there. So the words that we use, the language that we use, the message we send out, verbally or non-verbally, has an impact. It makes a difference. So I'm just inviting you to look at your own attitude, your own perceptions, your own biases, and get over it and begin to rethink how you can send out love and kindness, engagement. They're citizens, they're part of a community. Whether they come in and pass through or don't, they're still part of our community. And when anybody's hurting in our community, we're hurting. So, yes, the very lady in the very back row. The bed lady in the back row. She had a hand up first.
What is Utah's approach to a situation where you might have a juvenile sex offender and the family becomes homeless?
That's been a tough situation. We have not taken on the sex offender situation to the housing, and so it's one that's kind of on the shelf. We have some of that housing there at the Palmer Court for youth, a lot of street youth. We have about 950 street youth unduplicated. And so we haven't really addressed that yet. It's a tough one. Yes?
The question comes from the fact that I personally know of a situation where a preteen girl was removed from her family because the family became homeless and they ran out of options and she wasn't allowed in the first shelters.
Yeah. I know, it's a tough one. We haven't addressed that yet. Yes?
Okay.
You have a mic there somewhere?
Okay.
Where's Greg?
I have a mic.
Oh, you have it.
One of the things that money talks, and like getting all of these people together, I think is a really important thing. And I just wanted to say that if a lot of agencies here who work with the homeless, etc., could do a look at their finances in terms of what they do for a year, that would be a great impact.
Could do?
Especially to the legislature.
Well, okay, but...
I just want to give you an example. We had a meeting the other day, and one of our volunteers, we run a day shelter. One of our volunteers calculated the amount of coffee that we have done. Now, we know we spend a lot of money on coffee because we're open all day and whatnot, but we never put it together. And she counted up in the 10 years that we've been open that we have spent $93,000 on coffee. That's
Yeah,
coffee.
so there's all those kinds of things you do, but may I suggest that when you do that, you run it against a vision. Are the funds that you're spending getting you towards the vision that you have created? You can do all this kind of analysis, but you don't have a common goal you're working towards, so what? That may be in a tremendous investment. Or it may be, if we took that $93,000 and put it into this against this common goal, it's getting us towards that goal. Now, to get Alan to come and engage because he's a hermit, the coffee may be the actual thing that's needed to engage him progressively. That's a wise investment. Now with Sam, tell me again. Brian over here, he probably doesn't need the coffee. It's nice, but he can buy his own. But if you're doing it for him free, then okay, Brian, you're going to buy your own, okay? Because we're going to help him over here. He's probably saying, oh, okay, that's fine. So, but you need to run it against it. So when we had a common vision, then we look at all the funds we had. Is that funding contributing towards accomplishing our vision of housing opportunities for all the chronically homeless? Yes, sir.
When you have so many people in the room that are working on this situation, and in Utah, you came up with a paradigm shift and started
The Walmart shift.
A Walmart shift. You started changing the system. I come up with a new idea, but I'm having problems getting people on board with it or meeting people that would like to help. I've come up with building tiny houses for homeless.
Okay, let's take this idea. You need to then take the idea and show the economic benefit of it, the other benefits of it, and then you go and you get a small group, you get 3, then you expand that out. And so to go and make some big presentation, everybody will walk away and say, oh, that was interesting. It's a harebrained idea. But a lot of harebrained ideas work. What I found is that you need to begin to find those that buy into the idea, And see, the bravest person is the second person that buys into the harebrained idea. It isn't the one that has the harebrained idea. Not that it's just a harebrained idea. I'm just using an example. An unusual, innovative technology, harebrained idea. So, tell me your name again.
Bruce.
When Bruce says, I like that idea, he's the brave one. He steps over. Have you seen that video where somebody's out there dancing really weirdly? Then Bruce comes in and he starts dancing, then somebody else comes in and pretty soon everybody's dancing, but the weird one was out there dancing all by himself. Bruce was the brave one. So you need to find the Bruces to begin to build you a critical mass, or it won't go anywhere. You got to get other people to buy in your idea, and you can't do it in a general meeting like this. It's one-on-one, one-on-three, whatever. Yes, sir.
What part?
Why don't you speak into the mic?
Does education?
Speak into the mic.
Does education play a part in your program? By that I mean the homeless folks who have cut short their education. Do you, for example, do you impose a requirement for a GED?
Okay, what were some of those principles I just reviewed? No? We require nothing of him other than he pays 30% of his income and $50 and he doesn't beat up his neighbors. He can stay in his room all the time, but he's going to be visited. Make sure it's clean. When he's ready, he will go to treatment. Christina's working on him, working with him. When he says, if I get my GED, then I can get a better job, she said, yeah, right on. She'll help him get linked up. It is not a requirement. When we start requiring, matter of fact, you've seen this whole process. Come on, Bruce. Okay, put your hands up. So I go like this, come along. So, no, that's atypical. What would he normally do?
Push back.
He'd push back. So the minute I start pushing, I didn't tell him, when I start pushing, he'll push back. We need to rethink how we do this process. You're required to be sober and clean and dry and educated. Then we'll give you housing. So I'm talking to you. Okay, you're going to give us a report on your change. But we can require it, and for many of the homeless, that can work. But for the chronic, that does not work. So the permanent supportive housing, low demand housing, invites him in, develops a relationship. That works for that segment of the population. One fits all piece doesn't work. All right, yes?
Do you see that this has to be a statewide buy-in, or can cities
Oh,
or
sure.
areas start?
Columbus, Ohio, and the county, Franklin County, are a model. It's just Franklin County and Columbus, Ohio, are a model. The Ohio State is totally oblivious. Ain't even in this discussion. Columbus, so Ada County and Boise could be a stellar example. Now you have an example already. You have Catch. You're a model for using TANF money and rapidly rehousing. You're a model. You've been written up across the country. You get all kinds of exposure. Kudos to you. Kudos to Greg, wherever he is. And he had the idea, and he got somebody at the state. Now, the first time it happened, I understand. Second time he went back, they bought into it. And so, matter of fact, you're being used as a model to encourage other states and other locations around the country to use TANF money. There's only about 3 locations doing it. You're one of them. You can be innovators. Yes, sir.
Well, first I want to say I had the same idea as that gentleman on the housing.
So there's your second guy.
Yeah, so
Get together.
I thought it must be crazy, but there is an example in Olympia, Washington, and I can't recall the name right now, but it's some village.
Coyote Village.
Coyote Village, that's it.
All right, here's your third lady. Okay, you 3 meet right afterwards.
Okay, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but my question, as somebody mentioned, the people in this room kind of get it. It's
Yep.
the people who don't come to this room.
Right.
And we don't have anybody here from the state. We don't have anybody here from the county. We don't have the mayor. We don't have the city council people. They just pass ordinances to criminalize homelessness.
Okay.
That's how they address it, or
Okay.
have addressed it.
So what are you going to do about it?
So what are we going to do about it? So we had the person here who holds those meetings, but she left before you got into the solution part.
Okay.
She must have had another meeting to go to.
Sure, because we're over time.
We have to educate those people, but they also have to listen. They don't believe it's their quote-unquote core mission. And so
Okay.
the question that I would pose to you is the question that I think they would have, is how much did it cost? How much did it cost, not the hard cost, but the service cost, to do all the solutions
Sure.
that you've talked about? Because the people in this room don't have the resources. They don't have access to the resources.
Sure.
They are not given access to the resources. The city uses the money that seems like you are able to tap to pay $400,000 for HEC salaries, to pay off their note on the hotels that they've converted and charge $325 a month.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what your income is, you pay it or you don't get that room. And so I think the people in this community have serious issues, and no matter how much they try, and there's great examples and there's great people in this room, but we need to change the culture from
Okay.
criminalizing to helping.
So how are you going to do that?
How we can, right, how we can
Okay.
do it. I mean,
Okay,
I know we're out there, but how can we do that? 'Cause
here's some ideas. Here's some ideas. First of all, you need
Tell
to.
me about the money though, because I want to be able to answer that question. How much did it cost to do the solution?
Okay, I left one slide out here. We basically now, it costs us $7,800 per person to shelter and house, case management and house a chronically homeless person once that unit's built. $7,800 per year. So that's about $100,000 a unit per build. You can generally get money to build.
Yes, but you didn't do it all at once.
No, right. Look, you think it was easy? I had these same issues. We had these same issues. We had to go and you speak their language and you get them to buy in. And you go meet with this person, you meet with this group. I've met with more political leaders across the state than I can shake a stick at. Many of them bought into it. And so, but as you get together and woe is me, your social service providers, you now need to begin to say, what is it that they respond to, and you help somebody carry the message so you get them to understand the cost for the people in jail, the cost for the EMT in the hospital, and you get them to help tell the story to the political leaders and to say we now need to reprioritize the money, because if they're not seeing the results or the cost of that, they're not going to shift. They have a responsibility to educate our children. That's very important. To the economic development, that's very important. So these people are not bad people. They're just viewing the world through their belief window. And what they see is the priorities. You help them begin to shift their priorities. And you're not going to get any more money. You're going to repurpose it.
We've tried to communicate with the city.
Okay, but you need to say, you can go and communicate, and I can hear it as a shrill voice, somebody that's in excess, always saying this. We have a group in Utah that their way of communicating is getting on the Capitol steps and calling a rally and have the public come, and they say, woe is me, and terrible the government, and they should put money into it. And they get up there and they beat the drum and everything else. No one listens to them. The message is very important. It's very valuable, but no one listens to them because they've done it so that no one cares. They're over the line. The message is extremely important. I get frustrated with them. I've sat down and tried to help them understand. That does not get your message across. You need to speak their language. Learn their language. Communicate so they will hear you before they're going to understand your language. You have to adapt.
Show them how it will benefit them.
Right. Look, financially, politically, you may disagree with the language, but you move to France, you need to learn French if you want to be successful. You move to America, you need to learn English.
Okay,
Learn their language.
Sorry, Lloyd.
All right.
We've got time for
Sorry.
two more
About fell
questions,
for you.
and we're going to have to
All
wrap
right.
it up. So I'm going to
Okay.
give one to Walter here, and I'll look for the next hand.
It's sort of a two-parter. Here's what it is. When you're on Section 8 housing, how does Utah deal with this? You have 15% of your landlord-tenant rules that are handed down by your landlord. You have a set of landlord-tenant rules that are handed to you by the housing authority. And the problem is you have 15% of those rules that were handed to you by the landlord that conflict and cause conflicts. Like how you resolve noise issues with your neighbor.
Okay, you call Christine. I don't know that because I haven't gotten into those kinds of weeds. I don't know how that was being resolved. But what I will say is there are 3 reasons why people cannot get into subsidized housing. What are they? 3 reasons you can't put people into housing. No, they produce meth, sex offender lifetime, and a heavy-duty criminal, violent criminal. Those are the only reasons. Sean Donovan sent out an email in June of 2012 saying those are the only 3 reasons. All the rest of the requirements are put on by the local housing authority. You can rethink it. Only 3 reasons. So Alan can go in. He has a criminal history. He's mentally ill. He has substance abuse. But he doesn't have those 3. Therefore, you can house him if you choose. But most housing authorities say, well, we have this long waiting list, so we're going to cream those that we put into housing. Second question. Thank you for the opportunity to come and share. Hopefully, oh, stand up, please.
I don't know.
Sure. Mike. Mike. All right, tell us what you are going to do to change, since you said at the beginning you're going to change.
We're going to start sawing the big end of the log, and we're going to put a big dollar sign over it with an arrow going up for saved.
For whom?
For the powers that be that can give us the money to do the things we want to do.
So,
I don't know
okay.
exactly who that would be here.
But you're going to find out.
I'll find out.
Who's going to help you find out?
Some people.
Okay. Okay. Any of you know her? All right. So they're going to help you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right. Hey, appreciate the opportunity.